Before the revolution, a unique society was taking shape across the Atlantic. 13 colonies, each a distinct entity, stretched along the Atlantic coastline, from the rugged shores of New England to the fertile lands of the South. These colonies represented a diverse tapestry of cultures, economies, and social structures, all developing under the watchful yet distant eye of the British Empire. Each colony possessed its own unique character and way of life, shaped by its geography, its settlers, and its economic activities. This individuality would play a crucial role in the events leading up to the revolution. In the north, small towns and bustling ports like Boston, a hub of maritime activity and intellectual ferment, and Philadelphia, a beacon of enlightenment and commerce, stood as symbols of colonial ambition and enterprise. These northern cities thrived on trade, shipbuilding, becoming vital links in the transatlantic exchange of goods and ideas. A growing merchant class, fueled by entrepreneurial spirit and access to global markets, emerged as a powerful force in the northern colonies. In the south, vast plantations and navigable rivers dictated the rhythm of life, shaping a society built almost entirely on agriculture, with cash crops like tobacco and cotton driving the economy. Tragically, this agricultural prosperity was built on the backs of enslaved Africans, whose forced labor fueled the plantation system and created deep social and moral divisions. Despite their regional differences, colonists shared a spirit of self-reliance, a characteristic forged by the challenges and opportunities of the New World. This spirit was further shaped by the vast distance separating them from Britain, fostering a sense of independence and self-governance. The constant challenges of frontier life, with its inherent dangers and demands for resourcefulness, further strengthened this independent spirit. Local assemblies, elected by colonists, gave them a taste of self-government, allowing them to manage their own affairs and voice their concerns. These experiences in self-governance were planting the seeds of independence, nurturing a desire for greater autonomy and control over their own destinies. Yet, despite their growing sense of independence, they still saw themselves as English, sharing a common heritage, language, and culture with the mother country. They remained loyal to the crown, viewing the king as their rightful sovereign and protector, and they were proud to be part of the British Empire, benefiting from its trade networks and military protection. This delicate balance of loyalty and autonomy was fragile, a tightrope walk between allegiance and self-determination. However, a recent war for control of the continent, the French and Indian War, had irrevocably changed everything. The war's outcome and its subsequent consequences would dramatically alter the relationship between Britain and its colonies. The consequences of that conflict, particularly the increased British control and taxation, would soon test the very fabric of colonial life, pushing the colonists towards a breaking point and ultimately, revolution. The French and Indian War, a prolonged and costly struggle for control of North America, ultimately left Britain victorious. The triumph, however, came at a steep price, one that would dramatically alter the relationship between the mother country and its American colonies. The echoes of cannon fire faded, replaced by the rumblings of discontent. Victory masked a harsh reality. Britain was deeply in debt. The war had drained the royal treasury, leaving the government scrambling for solutions to replenish its coffers. The weight of this financial burden would soon fall heavily upon the shoulders of the American colonists. To pay for the war and to maintain a standing army in the colonies, Parliament, seated thousands of miles away in London, imposed a series of new taxes on the colonies. These acts, conceived in the halls of British power, would ignite a firestorm of protest across the Atlantic. These taxes were levied without their consent, without any representation in the British Parliament. The colonists felt their voices were not being heard, their concerns ignored. This perceived injustice became a rallying cry, uniting disparate colonies in a common cause. The Stamp Act of 1765, requiring a tax stamp on all printed materials, was a turning point. It was more than just a tax. It was a symbol of British overreach and a direct challenge to colonial autonomy. This was a direct tax that struck at the heart of colonial rights, impacting everyone from merchants and lawyers to newspaper publishers and ordinary citizens. It touched every aspect of colonial life, fueling widespread anger and resentment. Colonists protested vehemently, insisting that only their own elected assemblies had the right to tax them. They argued that being taxed by a parliament in which they had no representation was a violation of their fundamental rights as British subjects. No taxation without representation became their defiant slogan, echoing through town squares and reverberating across the Atlantic. It encapsulated the colonists' core grievance and fueled their growing resistance. Boycotts, organized by colonial merchants and supported by the general population, became a powerful tool of resistance. Riots erupted in cities and towns, targeting British officials and symbols of imperial authority. The colonists were making their displeasure known in no uncertain terms. And the rise of the Sons of Liberty, a secret organization dedicated to resisting British policies, followed. They were instrumental in organizing protests and enforcing boycotts, becoming a thorn in the side of the British government. Faced with mounting pressure and economic disruption, Parliament eventually repealed the Stamp Act, but immediately asserted its authority with the Declaratory Act, proclaiming that Parliament had the right to legislate for the colonies in all cases whatsoever. This act served as a stark reminder of Britain's ultimate control. More taxes came, including the Townshend Acts, which taxed goods like tea, glass, and paper, further deepening resentment and eroding trust between Britain and its American colonies. The colonies, initially divided by geography and economic interests, grew more united in their opposition to what they perceived as British tyranny. They began to see themselves as Americans, with a shared identity and a common cause. They were fiercely defending their rights as Englishmen, rights they believed were being unjustly denied by the British government. They saw themselves as upholding the principles of liberty and self-government. The gulf between Britain and America widened with every new law, every act of defiance, and every attempt to assert control. The two sides were drifting further and further apart, seemingly on an inevitable collision course. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the tension was palpable. Open conflict, once a distant possibility, now seemed increasingly unavoidable. The seeds of revolution had been sown. Boston became the epicenter of resistance. Tensions exploded in 1770 with the Boston Massacre, fueling outrage across the colonies. The Tea Act of 1773 led to the Boston Tea Party, a bold act of defiance. Britain responded with the Intolerable Acts, punishing Massachusetts and tightening control. Instead of isolating Boston, these measures united the colonies in support. The First Continental Congress convened, demanding rights and organizing boycotts. Militias began to prepare for war. The time for petitions was ending. Across New England, weapons were stockpiled and men drilled. The colonies stood on the brink. A single spark would ignite revolution. The initial shots had been fired, the battles engaged, and war had begun, but the ultimate goal remained shrouded in uncertainty. The colonists found themselves in a precarious position, caught between loyalty to the crown and a growing desire for self-governance. The path forward was unclear, fraught with peril, and demanded a profound reevaluation of their relationship with Great Britain. Despite the escalating conflict, many still clung to the hope of reconciliation, envisioning a future where they could coexist peacefully under British rule. They believed that a compromise could be reached, addressing their grievances while maintaining their allegiance to the crown. Petitions were drafted, envoys dispatched, and fervent prayers offered, all in the pursuit of a peaceful resolution. Then a powerful voice emerged, cutting through the fog of doubt and indecision. Thomas Paine's common sense swept away lingering doubts, igniting a firestorm of revolutionary fervor throughout the colonies. His eloquent and impassioned arguments resonated deeply with the common people, challenging the very foundations of monarchy and advocating for a complete break from British rule. Paine's words struck a chord, galvanizing public opinion and arguing forcefully for full independence. He painted a vision of a new nation, free from the shackles of tyranny and built upon the principles of self-determination and popular sovereignty. The idea of an independent America, once a radical notion, began to take root in the hearts and minds of the colonists. Recognizing the shifting tide of public sentiment, the Continental Congress responded, grappling with the momentous decision that lay before them. Debates raged, opinions clashed, and the weight of history pressed heavily upon their shoulders. The fate of the colonies, and perhaps the future of self-governance itself, hung in the balance. In a pivotal move, the Congress, understanding the gravity of the situation, made the crucial decision of appointing Thomas Jefferson, a brilliant and eloquent Virginian, to draft a declaration, a document that would forever alter the course of history. With meticulous care and profound insight, Jefferson crafted a document that would become the cornerstone of American identity. The Declaration of Independence boldly proclaimed that all men are created equal, a revolutionary assertion that challenged the established order of the world. It asserted that every individual is endowed with certain unalienable rights, rights that no government could legitimately infringe upon, including the right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to pursue happiness, a concept that resonated deeply with the aspirations of the colonists. These fundamental rights, the Declaration argued, came not from kings or earthly rulers, but from nature itself, from a higher power that transcended the authority of any government. On July 4, 1776, a date that would forever be etched in the annals of history, the Continental Congress, after much deliberation and with a profound sense of purpose, formally adopted the Declaration, irrevocably transforming a colonial rebellion, a struggle for redress of grievances, into a full-fledged revolution, a fight for the very soul of a nation. The signers, knowing the risks involved, pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, risking everything for the establishment of a new nation, a nation founded on the radical principle of consent of the governed, where the power resided in the hands of the people. The war was no longer just about taxes or representation, it was now a fight for a radical idea, freedom for all, a beacon of hope for the oppressed, and a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The world, witnessing this audacious act of defiance, would never be the same. America's revolution, born of necessity and fueled by ideals, had finally found its purpose, a purpose that would resonate through the ages. George Washington became the indispensable leader of the revolution. His resolve and character held the Continental Army together through defeat and despair. Thomas Jefferson gave voice to the ideals of liberty and self-government. Benjamin Franklin's diplomacy in Paris secured the crucial French alliance. Firebrands like Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry rallied the colonies to action. These men, despite their flaws, risked everything for independence. They were united by a belief in liberty and the promise of a new nation. Their courage and vision changed the course of history. The early years of war were marked by defeat and hardship. Washington's army was driven from New York and nearly destroyed. In the winter of 1776, hope seemed lost, until Washington's daring attack at Trenton revived the cause. Victories at Trenton and Princeton lifted morale, but challenges remained. The winter at Valley Forge tested the Army's endurance. Hunger and disease claimed thousands. Under Baron von Steuben's training, the Army emerged stronger. Meanwhile, the American victory at Saratoga in 1777 changed everything. It convinced France to join the fight, providing vital support. Franklin's diplomacy paid off. The revolution became a global conflict. The Americans had proven they could win. The tide was beginning to turn. The dream of independence was alive. With French support, the war shifted to the south, where brutal fighting raged. American commanders like Nathaniel Greene wore down the British with clever tactics. The British, exhausted and frustrated, retreated to Yorktown, Virginia. Washington and the French coordinated a daring siege, trapping Cornwallis by land and sea. After weeks of bombardment, Cornwallis surrendered on October 19, 1781. The world was turned upside down. The unthinkable had happened. The fighting lingered elsewhere, but the decisive blow had been struck. The British recognized defeat. The war for American independence was won. A new nation stood ready to claim its place in history. Winning independence was only the beginning. The new United States was vast but fragile, held together by a weak government under the Articles of Confederation. Economic chaos and internal unrest, like Shays' Rebellion, threatened the young republic. Leaders realized a stronger framework was needed. In 1787, delegates met in Philadelphia to draft a new constitution. They debated how to balance power, strong enough to govern, but not to oppress. The result was a federal system with checks and balances, rooted in the authority of we the people. The Constitution was imperfect, especially in its compromises on slavery. Yet it provided the foundation for a durable republic. The American experiment would survive and grow. The struggle for a more perfect union had only begun. The United States was born as a radical experiment in self-government. It challenged the old world's belief in rule by kings and aristocrats. The Declaration's words, "All men are created equal," echoed around the globe. America became a beacon for revolutionaries and reformers everywhere. Yet, the nation's ideals stood in stark contrast to the realities of slavery and inequality. The promise of liberty would spark generations of struggle and change. What began in 1776 was only a beginning. America's journey would be marked by both triumph and contradiction. The revolution ended, but the American experiment had just begun.